As everyone watched in amazement, Drake offered his hand and apologized.
"I'm so sorry, Mr. Williams. This is all my fault. I didn't recognize you right away, sir."
"That's okay, Drake. How could you have known it was me?"
"Mr. Williams, I had no idea that you were eating here today. Unfortunately, we're not prepared for you. Would you like me to set up one of the upstairs rooms for you?"
Blair and his guests couldn't believe their ears. Only the most influential people in Chicago were invited upstairs. "Not today. Thanks. I'm going to take a stroll."
"Okay, Mr. Williams. If you need anything, just let me know."
Drake gestured for his men to follow him out of the room. Officer Emmett sped out of the room and ran after Kevin. "Kevin, where are you going?" "I'm going home. I'm really sorry for all this. Let me give you a ride." "Okay." Kevin and Officer Emmett had just gotten to the parking lot when Blair ran over to them. "Kelly, what are you doing?" He figured Drake had been so nice to him because he was related to Grandma Jones. Just then, a long black car with tinted windows screeched to a stop in front of them. The door opened and someone fired what must have been tranquilizer darts at them. The three of them woke up one after another in what looked like the basement of an industrial building. "Let me go!" A second later, a man punched Blair in the stomach. He collapsed to the floor, writhing in pain. "Who do you people think you are? I'm a lieutenant at the 30th District Station." "We know who you are, Officer Emmett. That's why you're here. You captured dozens of my men lately. The day before yesterday, you were looking everywhere for me." "Xavier Marshall from the Alliance? What do you want from me?" "Officer Emmett, you have very handsome companions." "Marshall, let them go. I was the one who gave the order for your men to be arrested. It's my responsibility, not theirs." She knew very well what kind of dangerous organization the Alliance was. Her department had been trying to stop them for years. "She's right. I'll pay $5 million for Officer Emmett's life and my own." Then Marshall turned around and looked at Kevin. "Tell me, how much money would you pay in exchange for your life? You may be interested in my ring." Kevin showed him the ring he had taken from Dominic Archer. Kevin had a feeling that there was something special about the ring, but he didn't know exactly what it was. "Where did you get this ring from?" "It's always been mine." When Marshall heard this, he looked like he'd been slapped in the face. "Take him to the next room. I want to interrogate him properly." Then he turned around and left the cell. Two strong men escorted Kevin to the next room. When they got to the other room, Marshall asked the two men to leave. As soon as they were alone, Marshall apologized to Kevin and repeated, "I had no idea you were the Night King." When Kevin heard this, he was puzzled. He had no idea who or what the Night King was. But now that he saw Marshall treating him like his superior, Kevin figured he could take advantage of the situation to get out of the place. "If this guy thinks I'm the Night King, I guess I should act the part," Kevin thought to himself. "Well, I can't fault you for your ignorance," Kevin said to him coldly. "Thank you for not punishing me for my behavior," Marshall groveled. Then he cautiously asked, "What's brought you to Chicago?" "Nobody contacted me to make preparations for your arrival." "Do I need to inform you in advance where I want to go?" Kevin said with a sour expression on his face. Then he added coldly, "Just do your job and leave the rest to me." "Yes, sir," Marshall replied timidly. What Kevin didn't know yet was that nobody in the Alliance knew exactly where the Night King was. Marshall had obviously never met him, but when he saw Kevin, he figured he was too young to be in such a powerful position in the organization. That's why he'd been caught by surprise when he saw Kevin wearing the ring. Kevin casually sat down on a chair and asked him, "You just said that Officer Emmett caught a lot of your gang. How could that happen?" "It's true. She was able to infiltrate our organization." "That doesn't interest me," Kevin impatiently interrupted Marshall. "As long as we haven't been completely exposed in this town, you can handle the rest yourself." "I understand, sir," Marshall said very obediently. Kevin suddenly felt hungry. All he'd managed to have for breakfast was half a cup of coffee at Blair's fancy breakfast. "I haven't eaten anything today," Kevin said awkwardly, but he didn't finish his sentence. "Well, you're a busy man. I'm sure it's hard to find the time. I'll get someone to make something for you right away," Marshall answered very agreeably. Kevin nodded indifferently and Marshall left the room. Once Marshall was gone, Kevin took a look around the room. From the layout, he guessed that this was probably his private office. As he scanned the room, Kevin saw a black box. What's this? Kevin slowly walked over to the box and studied it carefully. The door of the room was still closed, so he forced the box open. Inside, there was a small vial of powder and a book on how to prepare advanced herbal remedies. Kevin picked up the book and flipped through it. Then his eye caught a recipe for a powerful hallucinogenic powder that looked a lot like the one in the vial. Based on the description, it seemed to be some kind of herbal weapon. What the hell is going on here? He thought to himself. Everybody seems to be into obscure herbal ingredients. First Cook, then Officer Emmett and Dominic, now this guy. Kevin heard a burst of hurried footsteps outside the door. He didn't have any time to think, so he stuffed the book and the powder under his shirt. Then he quickly closed the box and returned to his seat. When Marshall returned, Kevin clearly noticed that he'd glanced at the box. Was it fear that Kevin saw in the man's eyes? "You seem nervous." Kevin provoked him a little. "I was afraid I was neglecting you, so I rushed back," Marshall explained. Then he turned to the door and said, "Hurry up and bring the food and wine." Before Marshall finished speaking, 3 men came in with trays of sandwiches and fruit, along with a few bottles of wine. They placed it all on the table and hurried out of the room. "I'm very sorry, sir, but since I didn't know you were in Chicago, I didn't make any preparations. This is the best we could come up with on short notice," Marshall said apologetically. "I don't mind," Kevin said as he slowly picked up a sandwich. He looked at Marshall and said, "Have you eaten yet? Would you like to sit down and join me?" Kevin hadn't been threatening at all, but Marshall looked a little skittish. He quickly excused himself, saying, "I couldn't impose. Please, enjoy your meal. I'll be waiting outside the door if you need anything." Then Marshall rushed out of the room. Kevin finished off the meal pretty quickly. Then he opened one of the bottles of wine and poured some of the powder into it. "Is there anyone out there?" Kevin called towards the door. Marshall immediately pushed the door open and entered. He asked politely, "Is there anything I can do for you, sir?" "I'd like to reward your men for their diligence," Kevin said as he casually offered the bottle of wine. Marshall took the bottle and replied, "Thank you for your kind offer. However, we only drink to celebrate." "Are you telling me that my arrival here isn't something worth celebrating?" Kevin asked gravely. Marshall was happy to hear this. He knew very well that Kevin was trying to find an excuse for his men to be able to have a drink. "We're very proud to have you with us, sir," Marshall answered in the most flattering tone he could muster. "Then what are you standing there for? Don't you want your men to have this?" Kevin said with a satisfied smile. "I'll give it to them right away," Marshall said gratefully as he headed out the door. Kevin was starting to feel like his plan might work. Once these people drank enough wine, he could try to save Officer Emmett. But he still had some doubts. He'd gotten his ring from Dominic Archer. Whoever wore it obviously wielded a lot of power. But what was the relationship between Dominic and the Alliance? And what the hell was he doing with the ring? But he'd have to figure that out later. Right now, Kevin's top priority was to get out of this place. Unfortunately, a single bottle of wine wouldn't be enough to get everyone here drunk, even with some of the powder in it. So Kevin poured more of the hallucinogen into the rest of the bottles of wine. He mixed them well and called again. "Come back in." 2 of Marshall's men immediately walked in. One of them asked him very politely, "What orders do you have, sir?" "No orders, but I see that you've got it pretty tough here. So why don't the 2 of you take this wine and share it with the rest of the gang?" Kevin said generously. They were overjoyed that he was being so kind to them, especially considering his rank in the Alliance. They took the bottles and gave him a big grin. "Thank you, sir." "Bottoms up," Kevin said as he gestured to them to leave the room. After the 2 of them left, Kevin walked over to the room where Officer Emmett and Blair were being held. As he approached, the guards greeted him politely. Kevin gave a slight nod and instructed them. "Go and have a drink and a bite to eat with your buddies. I can watch these guys for a while." "Thank you, sir," they said excitedly as they headed over to join their comrades. What Kevin didn't know yet was that he'd gotten the whole gang worked up. There hadn't been anything to celebrate lately, so they hadn't had any alcohol in weeks. After they left, Officer Emmett was baffled. "Kevin, what the hell is going on? Why are they calling you sir?" "I'm not sure. They probably think I'm some big shot," Kevin said with a shrug. "It has to be a mistake. How could a lowlife like you be anyone of importance? They've obviously confused you with someone else," Blair sneered. Kevin looked at Blair and saw just how much he'd gotten worked over. His nose and cheek were swollen and there was still dried blood around his mouth. To add insult to injury, he was shackled to a pipe in the corner of the cell. Officer Emmett ignored Blair's insults. Instead, she turned her attention to Kevin and told him, "Since that's the case, you should find a way out of here. Then you can get some help and come back for us." "Just be a little patient," Kevin said with a smile. Officer Emmett was confused by his mellow attitude. A few seconds later, outside the room, there was a heavy thud. Then there was another one, along with the sound of breaking glass. "I drunk their wine," Kevin said with a smile. "Maybe you're not so useless after all," Blair said excitedly. "Don't just stand there. Hurry up and let us out." Kevin ignored Blair and walked over to Officer Emmett, who was still tied to her chair. Kevin untied her and helped her stand up. "I don't know exactly how long they'll be knocked out. We need to leave as soon as possible," Kevin said as he opened the cell door to let Officer Emmett out. "Can't you see that I'm still tied up?" Blair shouted. "And keep your filthy hands off of Kelly." "Blair, didn't you just agree to pay $6 million to save your own life?" Kevin asked with a sardonic grin. "Do you really think I'm that stupid?" Blair complained. "If you two leave me here alone, they won't care about my $6 million. I'm finished." "I haven't seen any sign that you're all that smart," Kevin replied. "Just stop talking and let me out," Blair sobbed. Officer Emmett sighed and said, "Kevin, please just let him out." "But Blair is so rich and powerful. How could he let a lowlife like me help him? He wouldn't live it down at the country club," Kevin retorted. "Stop being a hypocrite. If they hadn't mistaken you for someone else, you'd be dead right now," Blair roared. "Did you hear that? Officer Emmett, Blair definitely doesn't want me to save him," Kevin said calmly. He wasn't worried at all. From what he saw in the book, they should be knocked out for hours. Officer Emmett sighed again. "Kevin, I know Blair is far from perfect, and I apologize for his behavior, but please let him out anyway, okay?" "Apologize? It's up to him to apologize, not you," Kevin answered firmly. "Kevin, you want me to apologize to you? Dream on," Blair grumbled. "Kelly, don't waste your breath on him. He's not worth it." "Can you please stop arguing?" Officer Emmett said impatiently. "Don't you know who Marshall is? If we leave you here, you'll be dead by morning." Blair was stunned to hear her say this. He knew she wasn't exaggerating. Kevin didn't want to waste any more time. "I'm not worried. Blair can afford to pay his way out." "Kevin, I'm begging you. Let Blair out," Officer Emmett pleaded. But after all of Blair's cruel insults, she wasn't very confident that Kevin would listen to her. He was under no obligation to save her fiancé. "Okay, I'll do it for you, not him," Kevin finally gave in. "But there's just one condition. You have to say please."
Hi, Kevin here. If you're wondering what happens next, then stay tuned on the Pocket FM Universe channel for more episodes.